Hey guys, happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday the 29th of April, and we are going to review chapter 12 before we start reading chapter 13. Chapter 12, excuse this playroom mess behind me, that's my next chore. So chapter 12 was pretty short. Chapter 13 is about twice the length of that, so we want to jump in and go ahead and start reading so that it doesn't take up too much of your time. I am going to start by reviewing the answers to the chapter 12 comprehension. So if you want to get yours out, you can follow along, but also know that it is scanned and you can check your answers there. So for chapter 12, question 1, the answer is A. When Frolic was scared, Maddie carried him. You can find that on page 114. Answer to number 1 is A. Question 2, the answer is C. Maddie and Frolic shared bread for dinner. You can find that on page 114. This is the bread that Jean gave them before they left. So that is what Maddie and Frolic shared for dinner. 2 is C. Question number 3, Maddie ran out of food on the 4th night. The answer is C. Question 3 is C, and that answer is found on page 115. But he also explains that even though they ran out of the food that they brought, the forest was still producing berries and things like that he could eat, but he noticed that they weren't as good as they typically are, and some of them had spots on them, like they were kind of starting to go bad, but he still had food to eat at that point. Question number 4, Maddie picked up a pink ribbon on the path to the east. So number 4 is A, and you can find that on page 116. Found a pink ribbon and he put it in his pocket. Not sure why, but that's what he did. Question number 5, Frolic did not like fish, so he had a bird for dinner. C. 5 is C, and that's on page 116. Question number 6, this time Forrest felt different, more hostile to Maddie. So 6 is B. Felt more hostile. It means that he did not feel like as comfortable in it as he normally would. Felt like it was almost against him. He had to be on guard. So 6 is B, and you find that answer on page 117. Question 7, the trees in the forest created D, darkness and shadows. Even in the middle of the day, the trees seem to kind of go in and create this canopy above him. So where it used to be kind of light and welcoming for him, it was no longer that way. So number 7 is D, and that answer is found on page 118. And then finally, question 8, Forrest now had the smell of death and decay, which sounds disgusting. That answer is on page 118, right at the end of the chapter. He's painting this picture of this forest, and it is not pleasant. Okay, so again, a place where he once felt comfortable and almost welcomed compared to other people who entered the forest. He knew how to navigate it and he knew it well. But this trip, he's like kind of wanting to get out of there at this point because it's not the way that he remembers it. So chapter 13 quiz only has 8 questions also. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that chapter so that we can knock it out because it's about twice as long as chapter 12. Okay, I'm going to set this to the side, make my little note that we are starting the chapter at 4 minutes and about 15 seconds so that you can have that documented in the notes about the chapter or the video. Here we go, chapter 13. Such a swaggering, brash little boy he had been. With no father and only an impoverished, embittered mother to try to make a life for children she had not wanted and did not love, Maddie had turned into a life of small crimes and spirited mischief. We all know he was kind of a troublemaker. Most of the time he had spent with a ragtop band of dirty-faced boys who carried out whatever schemes they could to survive. The harshness of his home place led him to thievery and deceit. Had he been grown, he would have been imprisoned or worse. So we all know that when Maddie was a kid, he got into trouble, and that's just what that paragraph is describing. But there had always been a gentle side to Matty, even when he had disguised it. He had loved his dog, a mongrel he had found injured and nursed back to health, and he had come eventually to love the crippled girl named Kira, who had never known her father and whose mother had died suddenly and left her alone, as we remember from Gathering Blue. Mascot, Kira called him laughing, sidekick. She had made him wash, taught him manners, and told him stories. "I be the fiercest of the fierce," he had bragged to her once. "You are the dirtiest of the dirty faces," she had said, laughing in reply and giving him the first bath he ever had. He had struggled and protested, but in truth he loved the feel of warm water. He had never learned to love soap, though Kira gave him some of his own. But he felt the years of grime slip from him and knew that he could turn into someone cleaner, better. Roaming as he always had, Matty had learned the intricate paths of forest. One day he had found his way to village for the first time, and he had met the blind man there. "She lives?" the blind man had asked him, unbelieving. "My daughter is alive?" It was very dangerous for the blind man to return. Those who had tried to kill him, who had left him dead years before, thought they had succeeded. They would have slain him instantly had he found his way back. But Matty, a master of stealth, had brought him secretly at night to meet his daughter for the first time. He watched from a corner of the room as Kira recognized the broken stone that Seer wore as an amulet and matched it to her own, fitting it to the fragment given to her by her dying mother. Matty saw the blind man touch his daughter's face to learn her, and he watched in silence as they mourned Kira's mother together, their hearts connected by the loss. So this is telling the story about when Matty brought Kira's dad to her back in Gathering Blue. Then, when darkness came the next night, he had led the blind man back again, but Kira would not come, not then. Someday she had told Matty and her father when they begged her to return with them to village. "I'll come someday. There's time still, and I have things to do here first." "I suppose there's a young man," the blind man said to Matty as they traveled back without her. "She's the age for it." So Dad's like, "Well, maybe she has a boyfriend. That's why she's not coming." "Nah," Matty had said scornfully. "Not Kira. She has better stuff on her mind. Anyway," he had added, referring to her twisted leg, "she has that horrid gimp. No one can marry if'n they got a gimp. She's lucky they didn't feed her to the beasts. They wanted to. They only kept her 'cause she could do things they needed." "What things?" "She grows flowers, and her mother did too." "Yes, her mom taught her, and to make colors from them." "Dyes?" "Yes, she dyes the threads and makes pictures from them. No one else can do it. She has like a magic touch, they say, and they want her for that." She would be honored in village, not only for her talent, but for her twisted leg. "Turn here." Matty took the blind man's arm and guided him to the right of a turning in the path. "Watch the roots there." He noticed that a root lifted itself and stabbed slightly at the man's sandaled foot. It made him very nervous, guiding him on his return trip, because he could feel, being familiar with it, that Forrest was giving small warnings to the blind man. He would not be allowed to come through again. So we're getting the idea that this forest has a life of its own, okay? It warns people or threatens them in ways. "She'll come when she's ready," he reassured Kira's father. "Until then, I'll go back and forth between." But it had been 2 years since he had last seen Kira. Matty emerged from Forrest with a stumble, blinking at the sudden sunshine, for he had been in the dim thickness of trees for many days now, and felt that he had almost forgotten light. Page 124. He fell on the path and sat there panting, slightly dizzy, with Frolic pawing worriedly at his leg. In the past he had always, what would the word be, strolled from the forest, sometimes whistling, but this was different. He felt that he had been expelled, chewed up and spat out. When he looked back towards the trees in the direction he had come, it seemed inhospitable, unwelcoming, and locked down. So he's saying usually when he left the forest, he's like, "Oh, I'm out." But this time he's like, "Oh, I'm out." He knew he would have to re-enter Forrest and return by those same dark paths that now seemed so ominous. He would have to lead Kira through to the safety of her future with her father, and he knew suddenly that it would be his last journey in that place. There was not much time left, and he would not be able to linger here, to look up his boyhood pals, to reminisce with them about their pranks, or to brag about his status now. He usually did that when he came. He would not even have time to say goodbye to the stranger his brother had become. Village would close in 3 weeks from time of the proclamation. Matty had calculated very carefully. He had counted the days of his journey, adding in the extra days it took for his side trips to tack the messages in place. Now he had just enough time to rest, which he badly needed to do, collect food for the journey, and persuade Kira to come with him. If they moved steadily and without interruption through forest, though he knew it would be slower with the girl who had to lean on her stick, they would arrive in time. Matty blinked, took a deep breath, got to his feet, and hurried on to the small cottage around the next turning, the place where Kira lived. So Matty's made it through this forest, but he's saying, as much as I would like to visit with the people I used to know and brag about how well I'm doing, I just don't have time for that. Forest is closing in, and the village is closing up, so he has to get Kira quick, turn around, and go back. The gardens were larger than he remembered since his last visit almost 2 years before. She had expanded them, he saw. Thick clumps of yellow and deep pink flowers fringed the edge of the small dwelling, with its hand-honed beams and thatched roof. Matty had never paid attention to the names of flowers. Boys generally disdained such things, but now he wished he knew them so that he could tell Jean. Frolic went to the base of the wooden post that was entwined with a purple-blossomed vine, and lifted his leg to proclaim his presence and authority here. The door to the cottage opened, and Kira appeared there. She was wearing a blue dress, and her long dark hair was tied back with a matching ribbon. "Matty!" she cried in delight. He grinned at her. "And you've got yourself a new pup. I hoped you would. You were so sad, I remember, after Branchy died. His name is Frolic, and I'm afraid he's watering your—" So he's using the bathroom in her garden. "Clematis. It's all right," she said, laughing. She reached for Matty and embraced him. Ordinarily uncomfortable with hugs, he would have stiffened his shoulders and drawn back. But now, from exhaustion and affection, he held Kira, and to his own amazement felt his eyes fill with tears. He blinked them back. "All right, stand back now. Let me see you," she said. "Are you taller than I am?" He stood back grinning and saw that they were eye to eye. "Soon you will be, and your voice is almost a man's." "I can read Shakespeare," he told her, swaggering. "Ha, so can I," she said, and he knew then for certain how changed this village was, for in the earlier days girls had not been allowed to learn. "Oh, Matty, I remember when you were such a tiny thing and so wild." "The fiercest of the fierce," he reminded her, and she smiled fondly at him. "You must be very tired and hungry. You've just made such a long journey. Come inside, and I have soup on the fire, and I want news of my father." He followed her into the familiar cottage and waited while she reached for her walking stick that leaned against a wall and arranged it under her right arm. Dragging the useless leg, she took a thick earthen bowl from a shelf and went to the fire where a large pot simmered and smelled of herbs and vegetables. Matty looked around. No wonder she had not wanted to leave this place. From the sturdy ceiling beams dangled the countless dried herbs and plants from which she made her dyes. Shelves on the wall were bright with rolls of yarn and thread arranged by color, white and palest yellow at one end, gradually deepening into blues and purples, and then browns and grays at the other. On a threaded loom in the corner between the two windows, a half-finished weaving picture an intricate landscape of mountains, and he could see that she was now working on the sky and had woven in some feathery clouds of pink-tinged white. She set a bowl of steaming soup on the table in front of Matty, and then went to the sink to pump water into a bowl for Frolic. "Now, tell me of Father," she asked. "Is he well?" Page 128. "He's fine. He sends you his love." He watched as Kira leaned her stick against the sink and knelt with difficulty to place the bowl on the floor. Then she called to Frolic, who was industriously chewing on a broom in the corner. When the puppy had come to her and turned his attention to the bowl of water, Kira rose again, sliced a thick piece from a loaf of bread, wedged her stick around her shoulder again, and brought the bread to the table. Maddie watched the way she walked, the way she had always walked. Her right foot twisted inward, pulling the entire leg with it. The leg had not grown as the other had. It was shorter, turned, and useless. He thanked her and dipped one end of the slice into his soup. "He's a sweet puppy, Maddie." He half listened as she chattered cheerfully about the dog. His thoughts had turned to Frolic's birth and how close to death the pup and his mother had been. He glanced down at her twisted leg, how much more easily she would be able to walk, how much more steadily and quickly she'd be able to travel if her leg were straight, if the foot could be planted firmly on the ground. What's he going to do? He remembered the afternoon the puppy and his mother had been saved. Today he was very tired from the long journey through forest, but on that day he had felt near death. He tried to recall how long it had taken him to recover. He had slept, he knew, yes. He remembered that he had slept for the afternoon, glad that the blind man had not been at home to ask why. But he had arisen before dinner, weary still, but able to hide it, to eat and talk as if nothing had happened. So his recovery had only taken a few hours, really. Still, it had been a puppy. Well, a puppy and its mother, 2 dogs. He had fixed, cured, saved 2 dogs in the late morning and recovered by the end of the day. "Maddie, you're not listening. You're half asleep." Kira's laughter was warm and sympathetic. "I'm sorry." He put the last bit of bread into his mouth and looked apologetically at her. "You're both tired. Look at Frolic." He glanced over and saw the puppy sound asleep, curled into a mound of undyed yarn heaped near the door, as if the soft pile were a mother to doze against. "I have to do work in the garden, Maddie. The coreopsis needs staking, and I've never had a chance to get to it. You lie down and get some rest now while I'm outside. Later we can talk and you can go into the village and find your friends for a visit." He nodded and went to the couch to lie down on top of a knitted blanket that she had thrown across it. In his mind, he was counting the days he had left. He would explain to her that there was no time to visit with his old pals. He watched, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, as she took his bowl to the sink, placed it there, and then, leaning on her stick, gathered some stakes from a shelf and a ball of twine. With her garden tools, she returned to go outdoors, the twisted foot dragged into its familiar way. He had known everything about Kira for so long. Her smile, her voice, her merry optimism, the amazing strength and skill of her hands, and the burden of her useless leg. "I must tell you this," Maddie thought before he slept. "I can fix you." Okay. So, do we think he's going to try and fix Kira so that she's able to travel more easily on the way back to village? Do we think Kira's going to refuse to go? I do not know. So, here we are at 18 minutes into today's lesson. So we're going to start the quiz at 18:30. So everybody find your quiz. It looks like this. Pause it if you need to and get ready, because here is, let's see, chapter 13. You ready? Chapter 13, Comprehension. The first person Maddie had loved was A, his mother, B, Seer, C, his brother, or D, Kira. Question number 2. Maddie had told Seer no one would marry Kira because of her A, job, B, garden, C, gimpy leg, or D, personality. Question number 3. They didn't send Kira to the beast because she grows flowers for A, the florist, B, dyes, C, perfume, or D, the castle. Question number 4. It had been blank years since Maddie had seen Kira. A, 2 years, B, 3 years, C, 4 years, or D, 5 years. Question 5. Maddie wished he knew the names for blank so he could tell Jean. Remember, he gets to Kira's and he sees all this stuff and he wished that he knew the names of these things so he could go back and tell Jean. She'd be all impressed. Is it the names of A, trees, B, flowers, C, animals, or D, streets? Question number 6. While at the cottage, Maddie thinks of how much easier it would be to travel if he A, went first, B, healed Kira, C, carried the bags, or D, left Frolic behind. Question number 7. While Maddie took a nap, Kira worked A, on laundry, B, making dyes, C, in the garden, or D, on packing. In question number 8, Maddie quietly fell asleep, A, by the fireplace, B, on the couch, C, outside, or D, on the path. Okay, so go back and use your book to answer those questions the best you can. I'm going to see if I can go ahead and start to record chapter 14 so that everything is ready for you. And then you know that chapter 13 quiz review will be up tomorrow. Okay, so I love you all. I think we're getting somewhere in this book. Exciting things are about to happen. Is Kira going to go back? I don't know. All right, check you soon.